This week on the 167, we talk about staying alert, standing firm, and watching out. Welcome to the 167. Welcome back to the 167. You spend 1 hour in church per week usually, and what do you do with the rest of the 167? Well, at least half that time you spend it with us, right?
Half?
Half of an hour? I don't know.
Okay, maybe. Yeah.
There you go. What do you do with the other 166 and a half?
There you go. That'd be a better question. Because everybody wants to be here for this half hour.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, there's like 42-ish hours in there that you're asleep.
All right. I haven't done the math, but I'll trust you.
I like to play the 167 while I'm asleep and just absorb it through osmosis.
I tried that in college. It
Didn't
does
work
not
out for you.
work.
You know,
Hey, text us. Let us know. Did you try that in college and just try to listen to it while you're sleeping and let us know how it worked out for you?
I literally had a friend that did that in Bible college because he read the verse that said, meditate on my word day and night. And he's like, at night I'm asleep, so how do I meditate on the word? And so he just
play it.
Play the Bible.
Yeah, see if it works.
All right. So this week we wrapped up our series, Mad World.
Yeah, the world has gone mad, 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 mad.
I know. Even saw that clip on Instagram. I was like, how many mads are in this clip?
The mad, 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 mad.
That's right.
World.
So we wrapped up the series, and we were talking about standing firm in our faith. And I like the direction that the message kind of went this week. Talked about some, like I said, some things that almost seem paradoxical, like standing up and humility, things like that. But at the beginning of it, you kind of mentioned, you're like, man, I got limited time. You know, I can't do a real deep dive into what I'm talking about. What were some of the things that were left on the cutting room floor from this week or this series?
Well, the series in general, which was just an overview of kind of worldviews and the importance of worldviews. And so, if we could do a deeper dive, it would be, why is this so important? Digging deep into what all these other worldviews present and why it's so dangerous to drift away from a traditional biblical theism, where God is the center, Jesus is the foundation, he is the word. If the Bible says it, that's what we should live our lives by. When you start to drift away from that into these other aspects of belief and cultural norms, how dangerous that is. And I would probably like to go, a little deeper into maybe a little bit. We scratched the surface of this just a little while ago in a conversation we were having off air, but about
Ooh, you get to see behind the scenes here.
But how dangerous it is, and when you see culturally, when you step outside of the bounds of traditional theological biblical beliefs, and you start to skirt on some of the peripherals, then some of them are intriguing and they're enticing, and it's not complete error, but man, you can get off the rails in a hurry.
Right.
And that's what's happening in culture. Something is out there that looks appealing, and you're like, well, sure, that seems like the heart of Jesus. And on the surface it is, but then it goes south in a hurry.
Yeah.
It just goes bonkers, and you're like, whoa, I didn't know that's really where it was going to take me. And then it's too late. You are sucked in and going somewhere that you never thought you would go.
Well, and this is a double down culture. It's not a, oops, I made a mistake, I'm going to retract my statement culture. It's now I have to double down and make this my entire identity.
Yeah.
And that's
so
Christians and non-Christians alike.
Yeah. So, I guess the deeper dive would be just establishing, that firm foundation. We sang that song this week, that standing firm on your faith, what you have been taught historically through Scripture, Do not waver from that. Even though these other things seem to be so enticing and so intriguing and so invigorating and liberating and all these different ings
Right.
that are out there. And it's like, but man, that foundation is so important.
Well, and I think I would have loved to spend some time too on just the lie. I feel like that's out in culture where it's almost like what's being said right now is the opposite. It's like the ultimate gaslighting. It's like the minute you know, you can smack somebody in the face with a brick because they're intolerant. Like you can push somebody because their words are violence. Like I think
Yeah.
just that paradox of lies that's being weaved right now. Like I just think it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
It's sad, but it's also just like I'm like you have that gaslighting feeling like is anybody else like paying attention to this?
Yeah, I don't know that, Sunday morning in a sermon is the appropriate setting to do justice to what's happening in our culture.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's too deep and broad, but I agree with you. It's like, in our culture, we have this whole idea that you have to be tolerant. I don't have to be tolerant.
Right.
Well, how do those two things go together? Like I am so kind, but you're attacking me. That's not kind.
Right.
But I have to be kind to you because you say you're kind, but you're not. And how do those two things come together? Again, I don't know that Sunday morning during a sermon is that
You need,
appropriate setting.
You need like a pie graph and like
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy to try and even try, like you just said, like just to try and say it. And I think that but I love that you were touching this week, kind of on idolatry and some things like that, because I honestly feel like we're fast approaching a time when 80s and 90s, like we were trying to explain idol worship to people. Like, if you spend too many hours at the office, your job might be an idol in your life. And now I feel like we're approaching a time in our culture where they've abandoned religion and now they're having to substitute things for religion. And so you're seeing iconography come back where it's like we touched on it once before. I think we talked about it this week a little bit when you talk about the different spirits that people are serving, is that you're actually seeing people come back and say, it's not enough for us to be ultra super duper feminist. We serve Lilith. And I'm going, well, that took a turn because, like you're sitting there going, it used to be that, people would go, like I said, this thing could be an idol in your life, and people didn't have a context for that. And I think that since people have abandoned Christianity so thoroughly that they're looking for the religious in the secular, and they're kind of coming back to a state like that.
Yeah.
And so you spend some time on these three spirits that we battle. And so for this concept, like I just wanted to kind of let you kind of explain that a little bit to people because, are these real gods? Are they something that's a physical spiritual entity? Like what is that when we're talking about these three spirits? I'm going to read them off the notes. We talked about Baal, Asherah, and Moloch. And so these were things that in the Bible times, people would erect statues to them. They would worship them as gods. But you're talking about that these kind of three things are kind of making a comeback. What is that for people in a kind of a tangible way?
Yeah. All right. So, a resource, just one resource, Jonathan Cahn's book, Return of the Gods, is a great resource just to go and it'll do a little deeper dive, a much deeper dive.
And is there two of those books?
No. So Jonathan Cahn wrote the book, The Harbinger.
That's what it is.
And then he wrote The Harbinger 2. And then I think his most recent book is called Return of the Gods.
Yeah.
Okay, so same guy wrote those books. The premise is this, okay? Matthew chapter 12. And it's talking about unclean spirits and casting out spirits. It says, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places, seeking rest, but finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there. And so it's that idea. Okay, so what Return of the Gods, this book, the premise is based on this passage in Matthew, that the gods of the Old Testament, the spirits, and when I mentioned that in Ephesians 6, it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood or against people. It's not a battle against you or you or you. This is a spiritual battle. And it's a battle against evil spirits and principalities and evil rulers and these gods that have been put in places of authority. And what happened is Jesus came and set the captives free, okay? And we received Christ and were redeemed, but then we left the door open culturally or personally, and we have drifted away, and those spirits, like, they didn't disappear, they were banished, but now they're like, oh, look, there is an opening, we're coming back, and we're going to fill it, and it's going to be even more evil than before. And so that's the premise of the book. It's the teaching of Jesus here in Matthew, that we have to make sure that we do not leave the house empty,
Right.
that it is filled with his presence, with the Spirit of God, that we don't just clean the house and then leave the door open for all the dirt to come back in, because when it does, it's going to come back with force.
But how many times has that been somebody's story? And we've dealt with it here in church. I think we've all dealt with it personally. Is I go up to, I tell it's the Jesus take the wheel kind of mentality, where somebody comes forward at an altar call and they say, man, I'm going to give this to Jesus. I'm going to lay it at Jesus's feet. And I'm like, okay, cool. So like you said, if you imagine that your body as a temple, your body as a house, you turn all the furniture right, you shoo out all the bad things that are in your house. If it was, like let's say the monkeys got in your house, and you get them all out, and then it's like, okay, and then you don't close the door.
I've never had monkeys in my house, but that would be great.
I mean, I was gonna say pigs. I didn't know, like swine. I was trying to think. I'm like, what is gonna be the weirdest thing I could say? But like, you get everything out of your house that's not supposed to be there, and and then you just go great, and you leave the door open,
Exactly.
So for people, they'll say like, well, every Friday night I go and I hang out at a bar with my friends, and I just get blackout drunk, and you're just like, man, I just want to lay alcoholism at the feet of Jesus. And I'm like, that's great. And I'm like, what'd you do last Friday night? Well, I went to the bar and hung out. I'm like, no. Like,
Yeah.
You have to alter your life. You have to fill that void with something else, because it will be filled.
Exactly. And so the evil spirits it's the enemy, our great enemy, the devil,
Yeah.
has put in place, these spirits, these gods, these things that are with him,
Yeah.
aligned with him, and he's prowling around saying, okay, what is it in this situation that we can interject here? So, in my life, maybe I don't have a weakness in the same area that you have a weakness in. Okay. And so when the enemy's prowling around in my life, he's not going to come after me, with whatever temptation
Yeah.
that I don't struggle with. And so he's going to come after you, though, with that temptation. He's prowling around. He's going to keep trying. Okay, so those gods that I mentioned, so Baal. So he's not going to tempt me with having another god or removing the power and the presence of God out of my life.
Right.
That, like, the enemy knows I'm rock solid. I'm not wavering. He's like, well, I'm going to be wasting my time, but I'm going to prowl around in another area.
Right.
With sexuality, knowing that.
Which you talked a little bit about Asherah.
Yeah. So maybe we're going to throw this spirit in here because of, maybe, I can get back into that area of lust, or, some sexual thing that you struggled with, and so I'm gonna stay there for a while. I'm gonna linger there and prowl around in that and see if I can find a weakness, not in the turning away from God. That's futile. He's not going to do that. But maybe I can get in here. And so, yeah, there are some people that like Moloch. Like why do I care about Moloch? I'm not going to sacrifice my children. Like I'm not, abortion has never been an issue in my life. I'm not going to, take my babies and kill them.
Put them through the fire.
Yeah. But have you sacrificed them in other ways? Are there, and so you're like, oh, now I can kind of see where that prowling around is. So anyway, those gods or those spirits are at work.
Yeah.
And I had someone ask me right after service. I think it was the 10 o'clock service on Sunday. Someone stopped me and said, I'm kind of new to this idea. I thought there was only one God. I thought we were worshiping one God.
Little G's.
Yeah. And so I said, you're right, there is one true God, but Satan wants to present other options. And so I could tell there was a little confusion. And I said, have you known anything or read anything about Greek mythology? And he's like, well, yeah, a little bit. And I said, well, picture that with the gods of Greek mythology, it's along the same lines.
Right.
And he's like, oh, okay, well, that makes a little more sense. That, yeah, there is one true God, not to be confused with these other false gods. There was one true, powerful God, and all these other gods that have power.
Yeah.
Like they're real. They're not make-believe or imaginary, and they do have power, but they are not all powerful.
Right.
That's the difference.
Well, and that's a good analogy, I think, with the Greek gods, because the Greek gods were not all knowing. They could be semi-present at and people call, or in the Bible, call Satan the ruler of this world, at certain points in the Bible. And so it's like, okay, so he has power. I actually watched somebody explain this, and they just talked about, they said, I don't want to get into the specifics about what each thing does, but they call them celestial beings. And so, because in the Bible, you see people that carry God's throne, that they have like the head of an ox, and that they're like, we always picture angels as like a nice blonde man that comes to visit and he goes, I don't really know what's up there, but there's, in Revelation, there's beasts and there's that. He goes, but there are celestial beings or beings that exist outside of our dimensional reality. It says in the Bible that Satan took 1/3 of the angels with him. And so therefore there are these powerful celestial beings who are set against us in the spirit. And it says that Satan orders his ranks. It talks about there's rulers and principalities. And so
it's like a hierarchy.
Yeah. There's regional things. There's things that are set against you personally. And people all the time, they come through freedom or whatever. And they'll say, I struggle with pornography. I struggle with drugs. I struggle, like whatever it is. And then they fall again and they go, why? I thought I beat this. And I'm going, well, listen, if I can sweep your leg, and then, then you kind of fix that one time, and then we go up against it, I'm still going to try and sweep I'm still going to see if your knee is still bum. I'm still going to keep pushing that pressure point that I know that I've got you before. If I knock you out with a right hook, rest assured, I'm going to throw that right hook again, hoping to get that KO. And it's like, I think Satan's still going to come at you, but if you close that door, you fortify that door, all he's going to do is go to the nearest window. And so it's never going to end. It's just it's not about how do I close that off entirely and keep my house empty, but if I fill it, if I fill myself with the Holy Spirit, then he's even if he makes it in the window, he's going to encounter the Holy Spirit and he can't win.
Yeah. So I've this is maybe a weird analogy.
Go for it. I'm here for it.
But I've always envisioned this spiritual attack back to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Did you ever see that? Did you ever watch that? There's a Sunday evenings. Welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And they would always show these things, out in the wild. And what you will notice is you have this herd of gazelles, right? And they're beautiful. And then you have the hyena that's over here looking. It's the enemy, right? It's like a lion, but it's this hyena back here. and he's prowling around looking, and then he'll attack. But you know who he attacks? Old crippled Elmer, the gazelle that's old and lame and can't really get it. And the rest of the gazelles just scatter like crazy, and they can outrun the hyena. But the weak one, the one that just can't run as fast, that has a bum leg, or that has this ailment, that it's like, that's the hyena, gets it, drives it down, kills it. Right? Not the fast one, not the swift one, not the strong ones. It's the weak ones. And so that's what happens in the spiritual realm, where the enemy's prowling around, finding a weak person or a weak spot in the armor, a chink, and that's where he's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. We have to, if we had more time, and that's why we spend a lot of time on Sunday mornings in the sermons preaching about your foundation, your faith, what you believe, why you believe, the foundations of our faith. We're not getting off on some of the obscure things of the Bible, though they're intriguing and there's some value there. But our Sunday morning experience and teachings is really foundational to your life, to make sure that you are strong and that you're not going to get taken out by the enemy, that you're living in community, that you're living in communion with God and with one another. And so that's what's so important.
Well, and you're speaking to my heart on this with discipleship, which is, we have so many resources for people. If you're listening to the 167, we have so many resources for you, like the 167, like the Sunday morning experience. We as a church, we subscribe to Right Now Media on your behalf. So we spend money so that anyone in our church can have a Right Now Media subscription. Right Now Media is basically Netflix for Bible studies. And you can go on our website right now on the homepage and go to, I think it's watch, or it says media. And if you pull down, it says Right Now Media. You can get your own subscription. And basically it's a way that you can fill yourself during the week, because, and you can join a life group, on our website, where we know that there's no way that you can have a job and live in our community and only have Christian friends, but you can go to a life group and have that filling, that where it's not just about cutting friends out of your life, but bringing healthy people into your relationship. Right. It's not just about stop watching Disney Plus or Netflix, but it's about, what are you watching? What are you filling yourself with? We have tons of resources for that, but it's just a matter of if people individually are going to take that opportunity.
Yeah. And again, I mentioned that we're having a conversation, prior to coming on to the podcast. And part of that conversation was another person was carrying a book, and I'm like, oh, I just heard about that book. And then we talked about that book, about prayer. And we had a conversation there about prayer, which led into some other things to consider and to be challenged by, and some teachings. And like, is that true? And it causes you to think through what you believe, why you believe it, how you can be supported in your faith. And it's not doing life in isolation. When you do life in isolation, you will become weak, and you'll become vulnerable, and you'll be in your own little circle, your own think tank. And all the things that you think are true, you'll convince yourself are true, and then you'll be off in Never Land, and the enemy will attack you and bring you down.
Well, in that same vein, I actually heard something this week that they were talking about zebras, and how the zebra camouflage is with other zebras. And so they said that there was researchers that were studying zebras, and they would start to like sketch a zebra, or like observe it, and then they would go, oh wait, they'd lose the zebra in the herd. And they would go, what they would do is tag its ear with like a red tag, so they knew which one to observe. And the minute they tagged it, it was dead. Like the lions would come eat it, the hyenas would grab it, because they could distinguish it from the rest of the herd. And it was like, so a lot of times we're so concerned with our individuality. It's like, it's not enough for me to be a follower of Christ. It's not enough to have the same Holy Spirit that everybody else has. I need to be special and unique and different. And it's like, in the individuality, you are creating that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask you this last point that you made. You were talking about stand firm and be strong. That's what Peter exhorts people to: stand firm and be strong. And then the verse that you use, though, for that is 1 Peter 5:6, which is humble yourselves. Therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. And I'm just sitting there going, that is so counterintuitive, I think, for me and for our listeners. So what is the link between standing firm in your faith, which I would think that's standing up to people, it's standing up at your job. It seems like a bold thing. What is the link to humility in that?
Yeah. So again, we can't do a deep dive, but in our culture,
Yeah.
what's prominent in the world today are words like brave and courageous and strong and bold, and those are words that are being used in our culture that don't mean what we would use them to mean in a biblical context. So to be strong, to be firm, to be brave means not in my own strength. It is not about me. It's in my weakness that I'm made strong. So it's not that I'm strong, it's He is strong, living in me, giving me power to do what He wants me to do, to live the life that He wants me to do. Because on my own, I am weak. So how I get strong is through humility, to come under the mighty hand of God. And it says, then as I get under the hand of God, that's when He will lift me up and give me strength.
Yeah.
Like He becomes the wind
Beneath my wings. Well, like even when you're saying that though, I just picture that if you can picture this giant hand, and if you're on top of it, it's like you're getting pelted by all this stuff, and He's like, no, just come underneath, and I'm going to breathe this umbrella that protects you, and then He kind of uses His two fingers to pinch and just raises you up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but still has that protection because you're under His hand.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah, and so it's this. I've been kind of planning a series coming up in several weeks about prayer and some of the postures of prayer, but approaching prayer in humility, okay, of coming before the throne, bowing before God in humility. And so in life, to live the life that He wants us to live, a life of victory, a life of success, of defeating the enemy, that doesn't happen because I'm so good. It happens because He is good. It doesn't happen because I'm strong. It happens because He is strong.
right.
And if I can recognize that and realize that in and of myself, I'm nothing really. I don't have anything to offer. This podcast is worthless if all you're tuning into is to hear
Fast and the Furious references.
a couple of people talking about stuff.
Yeah.
It's only through the power of God and His hand and the Spirit of God using this to communicate truths. Because there are times when, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And that quick prayer of God, I submit to You. I humble myself, and then something profound is said, but it wasn't because I'm profound. It was because the author and the finisher of my faith, the one who says my word will go out and accomplish everything that I intend it to accomplish, when I submit to Him, He does His work.
Yeah.
But when I say, oh no, I'm so brave and I'm so strong and I'm so courageous.
Me.
Yeah, then it becomes all about, who I am and what I want, and look at me. And again, for a short period, that people will say, yes, look how brave they are. Look how strong they are. Look how whatever they are. But again, it'll start to crumble over time because of pride. But when you humble yourself, and God is the hero,
Right.
not you, not a ministry, not a church. God is the hero, and His mighty hand will then lift you up. That's what this is about. Not about an agenda, not about, a feeling, not about a belief. It's about God.
Well, thank you for just bringing that to us this week. And like I said, I hope you guys really like this series. Join us for our next series coming up. We got some great stuff coming up this summer on prayer and spiritual disciplines. We'll see you guys next time here on the 167. Hey, welcome back to 7 Minute Stories. We are here with Jenny Butel. Say hi to everybody, Jenny.
Hi, everyone.
So 7 Minute Stories is a time where we just talk about our walk with God. It could be something that's happened recently or just tell our story for life. So I'm going to give you the floor. Take it away.
Perfect. So I was born in Baldwin. My family was very involved in the church. We lived in a small community, went to church in a small community, and pretty much anything that we could do, we were always there. So whether it was Sunday school, youth group, just all of those things, it was something that we did. But I really feel like it wasn't until college that I really kind of felt like God was speaking to me, or just ways that my faith really started to grow. So I started off in college at Auto University. That's where I met my now husband. He was my first and only ever boyfriend. So just kind of going through that adventure was, something to say. But I started as a art major as well as a theater. Sorry, I doubled in art and theater. And so theater's kind of led me down this dark path where the shows and things that they were doing just were not reflecting Christ. And so it was kind of this battle in my head of like, okay, like this is what I'm here for college for. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, versus kind of like, hey, like this is not what Christ talks about. This is not biblical. This is not, what you're supposed to be doing. And so I really battled with that for quite a while. Ended up transferring my junior year to Baker University. Kent and I were still dating. Of course, there's just kind of that long distance thing. Well, long distance of 30 minutes away, So I ended up dropping the theater major. It was a big change, but really focused on my art. And so for that, I had to make up these 15 art pieces, and they could be pretty much anything that you wanted them to be. But I really wanted to kind of depict what being a Christian was, what my faith was. I've never been very good at using my words, and so that was just a way that I was artistically able to express myself. And so I think my favorite kind of pieces that I got from that, there was a 4-piece series of the conditions of the heart. And so there was a quote that was shown on my Facebook feed by a friend that was just about how you can be broken and torn down, and just how we try and piece ourselves together. And so I really wanted to kind of focus on that. And so like the first part was this heart that had staples, and it was, being sewn together and just broken down, how you as a person tries to hold yourself together. And of course, it's never going to work. And so then the next piece in the series was where you see this hand that God is sewing it together, and he's making you whole again. And then the next piece was where God starts playing at your heartstrings. And so it's this heart that's turned into this guitar, and kind of that play on words where God really starts working in your life. And then the last one, it was very different than any of the other ones in the series of just the style that I did, but it was stipples with Sharpie. And so it was just kind of how all of these pieces that God has, he has this whole big, beautiful picture of this heart. And it was called Transform to Answer the Call. And so it was this heart that was answering a little phone. But anyways, I felt like those have just been like such a transformation, just kind of a testament of what God has been doing in my life recently. So after college, Kent and I ended up getting married in September. And our journey just kind of didn't go as expected. So in November, his dad ended up passing away. So he had been diagnosed with a esophageal cancer, and it was pretty aggressive. And so it took his life. And so kind of coming from this expectation of what I thought our marriage was going to be, of, we're going to have dinners together, we're going to do this and this and this. It was very much not what I anticipated my marriage to be. But we made it through. It was a rough first year, as most marriages usually are. But
the first year is rough anyway, but then
Yeah.
you throw that into the mix. That's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. And of course, like after college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, just career-wise. I had this art degree, but just not really a direction of where I was supposed to go. And so I kind of jumped around to some different jobs, started in a bakery, I worked in Starbucks, I went to the school district, worked as a para, but the pay just wasn't financially what we were able to meet. And so I really had this passion for working with kids. And so ended up bringing me into child welfare. So I worked for an agency for, ended up being 3 years, but I was working with kids that were in the foster care system, trying to find their permanency, whether that was through adoption or reintegration. And so it was very challenging. God helped me grow in a lot of different ways, helped impact a lot of different families, a lot of different kids. But it, as difficult as it was, it was still that rewarding position. And 2020, I feel like, was a real big season of change for us. So at this point, like Kent and I had kind of been church hopping, just really hadn't found where we were supposed to be plugged in. And 2020 was kind of the change of that. So we, sometime between 2019, 2020 was when we really got plugged into New Life. And we're like, okay, we're going to do this right. We got plugged into, it was actually your life group.
Yes, it was. I loved having you guys in the life group.
So yeah, we were plugged into church. We decided at that point we were going to move in with my mother-in-law to try and save money. And of course, that was when we found out that we were pregnant with Clarity, as life goes. So of course, we had this whole mixture of COVID coming in, lockdown, finding out we're pregnant like literally a week or two after we got locked
Working with
down.
foster kids. I mean, like, this is a
pile it
continual
on.
challenge.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, thankfully my pregnancy was pretty smooth. God definitely had a hand in it. Just, there were some scares of when I had close contact with a kiddo that had COVID, and like, thankfully he brought it through where like that never affected me. So, she was a beautiful baby girl born in December, Clarity Joy. So, but it was really just shortly after that she was born that we realized that there was just something that wasn't quite right. So I had chosen to nurse her, and there would just be times that, after she would feed, that she would just have a lot of tummy pain where she would just cry for hours, be screaming, just there was nothing that really could console her. And so thankfully at that point, like, God knew what we needed. We were, I think our life group had expanded, and so we were actually with Ryan and Tylee Ellis in their life group, and of course they have experience with, they have 4 beautiful daughters, and so, talking with Tylee of just like, she was a huge support in just kind of navigating the whole new parenthood thing. That is a whole journey in itself, but throw in having a toddler or a baby that is, having some tummy issues, it just was not fun. But she had kind of suggested, food journaling or kind of finding out like what the cause was. And so we found out that like eggs would make her throw up, and avocados and dairy were what was causing all of that, just painful tummy, gas, just all of the things. So through a lot of defiance, and I did not want to give those things up, but I knew that I had to do it for, the best of my baby. And so I did. We still had some hiccups along the way of, I really wanted that cheeseburger or whatever. And,
It was a terrible time for avocado toast in your house.
Yes. So we kept trucking along dairy-free, just kind of through that journey. So when she was 10 months old, so it was October of 21. Yeah, sorry, my dates are all weird. But I decided it was kind of a time for a change with just my career. I'd been working from home with her, but of course, having a baby that was getting a lot more active, it just was not as feasible. And so I ended up working with Discover Academy just as a teacher, which is where I'm currently. But I was able to be there with my baby. And of course, there was just kind of this like giving up control of like, up until that point, I was the sole caregiver for her. I was the one that was giving her the food. But I kind of had to give up that control and let somebody else do it. And so I feel like that was one way that God kind of was starting to work and worming his way into my heart. But there was one time where she ended up picking up a piece, like a little crumb of biscuit off the ground, and she ended up breaking out in hives, which was terrifying as a parent. Like, that was not something that you ever want to see, but thankfully she was okay through it. We kind of kept going. It was, I'd always heard about the idea of healing, but it was just kind of that far-fetched idea. I grew up in a Baptist church, and so it was just kind of like, okay, like it can happen to someone else. Like it happened in Old Testament, but it's not going to happen to me. Like it's
It's going to
not
happen in Africa somewhere.
It's somewhere else. Someone else deserves it more than I do. And so I really feel like God was just trying to lay that on my heart, that idea. And so there was like just some very specific pinpointed places in my life that I can be like, look back and be like, oh, nope, that's where God was working. And so one of those was the If Gathering. That was 22, where there was a speaker that was talking about, I think she was a songwriter and she was writing on Lamentations. And of course, Lamentation, I never, but it just really, it spoke to me of like lamenting to God, like letting him know your heart. And so I think like we lived in Ottawa at that time. So I went home and I just had a very spirited conversation with God about like, how can you let this child that you love so much, like suffer like this? No, it's not that she couldn't survive. Like, it just, like, you want your baby to be able to have cheesecake one day. You want her to be able to have that cheeseburger, or not have to worry about reading labels and, you know, just that cross-contamination things. Like, going to a burger place that cooked it on the same grill, like, it would cause a reaction. It was very hard. And so we kept working towards this. We kept praying, kept seeking. And so it was kind of, so we had a worship kind of night at a friend's house where God was really, really working on like my heart, kind of preparing that just for me to be able to accept it. And so I realized that there were things that were just kind of holding on from past things in my life that were keeping me from experiencing this, keeping me from at least having that experience. And so ended up turning into the spontaneous prayer session of giving up fear, giving up anger, things that I didn't realize from my past childhood were, you know, playing an effect on it. But so after kind of letting that, then I continued just diving deeper, wanting to read some books, reading some resources, reading scripture. And I'm very kind of one of those skeptical people that has to see it for myself. And so it's like, okay, Kent, like you got to get me someone like from the church or something that like I can talk to. Like I have all these questions, like I need to talk to someone. And so he's like, okay, like, you need to talk to Allie Mays and Meredith Hall. So like, okay. So I ended up meeting with them 2 separate days, but they both quoted the same scripture, and I can't tell you exactly where it's from, but I believe it's Matthew like 20, where Jesus is walking through the crowd, and there's a woman that reaches out and she touches Jesus's hem, and she's healed. And so it was just this beautiful picture, and I went home that night because, you know, up until this point, I was probably 15 months or so that I had eliminated dairy from my life. Like, it would cause some very bad tummy issues for me as well if I had cross-contamination, you know, stuff.
Well, and was at that time, I know that Meredith has been healed of a gluten allergy, and then Allie has been healed of lactose intolerance. Was it at that time where had they been healed of those?
Yes.
Yeah, so they were sharing that with you as well?
Yes. So it was just a time that we were able to kind of meet and answer questions and just kind of hear like their testimony, which was just kind of a beautiful thing, and just kind of, I don't know, truth to me that I could, okay, like,
You're not crazy.
Yes, there is somebody that I know that has had this experience. So it wasn't quite so far-fetched. And so that night I went home and I prayed that over myself. I was like, okay, Jesus, like, I am reaching out, I am touching your hem. And so I'd had a bit of milk chocolate that night, and like it normally would have sent me into the bathroom, like terrible tummy pains, like, but there was no reaction to it. I think we were actually having the marriage conference the next night. And so Kent and I kind of talked about it. I was like, okay, like they're bringing out dessert, like it's cheesecake. Like, like if this isn't God, like if this isn't testament enough, like, okay, like I'm going to have it. And there was like no reaction to it. It was the best cheesecake I'd had for a while. So thank you, Lucas, for making that happen.
Well, praise Jesus, man. That's great.
But that whole weekend that, just that I had my healing, then I had this song that's by Ty Tribbett that was just going through my head nonstop. And it's, if he did it before, he can do it again. If he did it before. And so it, like, that was just this sign to me that he's like, okay, like maybe not yet, but like I'm going to heal Clarity. And so we kind of skipped forward. She was still having some issues with it, but we hit June. And at our center, we celebrate Donuts with Dads. And this again is just kind of like God's way of working. Of like, normally we would have had our chef that would have been able to cook like a muffin or something that would have been dairy free for her, but I think they were out sick, or there was something where there was no alternative. The donuts that we had were full of eggs, full of dairy, like, just chocolate, like wonderful goodness.
All of the good
all
things.
the good things that she should not have. And so like I had prayed that morning. Kent was coming to, my husband was coming to celebrate with her. And so, of course, I'm down in my classroom, and he's upstairs with her in her classroom, and he comes down and in Kent fashion, and he's like, hey, so I gave Clarity a donut. And just the mama heart in me was like, you did what now? Like, you did what to our daughter? I was like, I don't have this. I don't have this. Like, she is, what are you doing? Like, we're going to go to the hospital. Like, and he's like, I prayed about it, and I just felt at peace. And he's like, you should too. Like, just have God's peace. And so I just went through that whole day, like worrying, like checking in with our teacher, like, hey, is she okay? Is she acting all right? And they're like, yeah, she's fine. Like, and so she had no reaction. She slept through the night. And it was great. I think we had tacos the next night, and I was like, hey, I didn't give her any dairy. Like, I didn't, I just felt a little like scared. Like, what if it's going to happen? Like, it's 48 hours after, like, what's going to happen? He's like, well, why not? And so he's like scooping on sour cream on her plate or cheese. And like she had no reaction. And it was just this beautiful testament of God and his greatness and his goodness and just what he can do and just how he can kind of work on your heart, how he knows what you need. And so just kind of, going through life now, she's 2 years old. She's loving life. She's loving all that dairy. God's kind of working in my life too. I am the new art teacher of NLCA. So just ways that he's opening doors and opportunities. It's amazing to see. So that is my not quite 7-minute story.
Hey, I loved every minute of it. I just love the theme throughout your entire story of that steady faithfulness of whether it's trial or whether it's victory. It's like, I'm just going to do what the Lord's calling me to do. I think it's fantastic. Thanks for coming in and sharing it.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
thanks for having me.
We'll see you guys next time here on 7-Minute Stories.
If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church, and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.